I'm a
Hi,
beauty.
ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I'm Greg DeRocher, President and CEO of the Cambridge Chamber of Commerce. Of course, on your screen somewhere lurking is Ian McLean. He's the President and CEO of the Greater Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber of Commerce. And one of our best friends
Yes. If we have
is,
friends,
if
but
we have
yeah.
friends, of course, is Matthew Bondy is joining us today. Now, Matthew has he has a CV that's as high as the CN Tower. No, I'm just kidding. But he has he has certainly spent time in influential areas. He's former assistant deputy chief of staff for Premier Ford. He's worked at Communitech in senior roles there. He has worked in other consulting agencies in senior roles, and now, as we're all excited to announce, is Bondy and Associates, a consulting firm, just taking occupancy here in Cambridge, down at the Gaslight District, and with alongside Hip Developments in their office space. And so, but Matt is really a good advisor from our perspective on subject matter like this, but more importantly, his awareness of government programs and issues and solutions of the day is outstanding, and we rely on him for a lot of our own help and guidance for you. So where we're getting some of our answers that we convey to you are usually coming from Matthew Bondy of Bondy and Associates. So Matt, thanks for joining us today.
Eh,
That's quite the plug. Thank you, Greg. It's good to be
Well,
here.
I would just echo and say, and you've been on the radio show a couple of times, so I want to thank you for making Greg smarter because it's a Herculean task. It takes a village to make Greg smarter, but we appreciate that. Listen, Matt, let's start maybe 30,000 foot view, and then we'll dig into what some of the programs are. I mean, we had and there's a lot that's happened since Donald Trump got inaugurated January 20th. The prime minister left. The federal liberals have gone through a leadership. Now we've been through a federal election. We've had a provincial election. Donald Trump has had tariffs up to 145% on some countries, and us. I mean, it is talk about a lot has happened in the last 5 months. Where are we at now from your perspective in terms of, because there's still a lot of confusion, there's a lot of angst in business, pick a sector, everyone's affected by this in different ways, but give us your kind of perspective of where you think we're at, because then we can drill down on some of the detail of how we help businesses in different sectors kind of take the next steps to try and get through this.
Yeah, for sure. So thanks both to you, Ian and Greg, for having me on. I appreciate it. Appreciate getting to hang out with your members. So I hope we can have a good chat and catch up with each other a little bit. What's the state of the union right now? I think, it appears to me that Mr. Trump has kind of overindulged on the excitement of his new mandate. And, from the moment he stood out front of the White House with that board that identified which countries were going to get hit with which tariff based on a completely fantastical formula, that I think was peak chaos. And I think the chaos has been slowly diminishing since then. My read is that he's been looking for dignified off-ramps from some of the most wild trade measures that he has been implementing since becoming president. You'll recall, that big list of big, beautiful tariffs really didn't last more than a week or so. And he started to say, well, everybody's been being so nice about this, I'm going to get rid of most of these tariffs. And he's already backed off with China. China blinked, but he did too. So I think we're past peak chaos, and I think we're starting to negotiate on both multilateral and bilateral bases what the new normal is going to be. And I do think Trump overplayed his hand and has had to walk back the most wild elements of his program. But overall, despite that, I would say tactical overreach, this is very, very predictably President Trump. He goes to a maximalist position. In negotiating, sometimes you call that MPP, your maximum plausible position. And then you walk it back from there to something that's actually quite status quo. And so I think that's what we're seeing play out in real time. And Canada now is going to be either starting early or on time in 26, the renegotiation of the USMCA, the NAFTA 2.0. And that's really the opportunity to reset the relationship on a trade and hopefully security perspective as well.
So just let me follow up on that, because I think that's the jumping off point for us is, I think that's probably, well, you're smarter than us, and I think that's what you've described is right there. But now we go from where we are now to the renegotiated. We still have companies that are having to lay out in auto and other places that are being affected by the tariffs that are still in place.
Yeah.
Like there is upset right now. Is there further kind of ratcheting down while we go through, and we were just talking about this on the radio show that we recorded for this week. Trade agreements ain't going to get done. It's going to be like 12, 16, 18 months to go through the detail and actually have an agreement. I don't think anyone on this call or that will watch this show over the coming week or a couple of weeks will be very, like, that won't be edifying to say, geez, like in 18 months, I'll have some certainty in my business. So what's the between now and then? And is that some of the programs that are being put in place by the feds and the province? Because there's a lot of hurt right now that I don't think can wait for the traditional negotiation to sort itself out.
Yeah, I think you've got it. So what I see happening now is with the lack of organic certainty in the market, like we've got a disruptive president and we've got disruptive policy in the United States. So in the absence of a more organic sense of balance or certainty in the market, what governments in Canada are doing, in particular Ontario, trying to manufacture a synthetic equivalent to certainty by saying, listen, we know it's chaos out there, but we in here are going to provide as much certainty through economic support programs as possible, because we don't want to see you shut your doors. We want to get through this and make sure we don't lose big chunks of our economy before we get to a new deal with the United States.
Yeah, it's just absolutely crazy times. And I know there are government organizations and agencies and programs out there to kind of assist. And I think one of them, and I wouldn't know where to turn, Matt. I've been trying to do some work on it, but Marty here with his electric tractor business, this is really, really interesting. So Marty emails me a couple of weeks ago and says, Greg, I don't know where to turn to find out what percentage of tariff I have to pay, because a lot of his components or a lot of the tractor comes from Europe. It comes over here, but it's got a lot of Chinese parts in it as well, or some Chinese parts in it. And then he does some assembly work here as well in Canada, and then he ships them or sells them into the United States. Trying to figure that out. Marty sent me yesterday. I think it was yesterday, Marty sent me I guess the government schedule on that.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Like you have to have a science degree to go through and decipher how you're going to figure out what percentage of this tractor has Chinese tariff and European tariff and Canadian tariff. It's almost an impossible task. I don't even think that at some point down the road, the government's going to be able to have border control, are going to be able to figure out what it is. Like that's going to be the problem. Marty, I haven't got all of it right, but maybe if you want to jump in and just kind of reiterate some of that, that'd be great.
Well, with lack of ability to find places, I went to ChatGPT and I says, give me the latest. And it cranked out the USMCA, and this doesn't qualify as USMCA. So now we're into the general tariffs. And it's coming back and saying that's a 25%, plus it could be an extra charge on the Chinese parts, which, okay, that's something. It could be 10% or whatever it is. But then I would have to go back to the manufacturer and get a bill of materials that establishes what is Chinese and what is European and what is Canadian. And then I guess submit that with every shipment that goes so they can determine tariffs. I don't know if that's a correct assumption or not.
Yeah, I think, Matt, that's one of the things that we've been hearing, and I, if you feel free to comment on this, but this is Marty's issue is what, and the problem, because we got to know each other very well during COVID, and when we would have you were at Communitech, is sectors were generally, if you were in food and beverage, you were, everyone was in the same zone. If you were in finance, you're all kind of in the same area code of how the COVID closures, etc. This is very unique to Marty's business. Is completely different than than Greg's business, because it really depends on where your inputs are, where your market is, etc. One of the things we've been hearing is Marty's issue is like, and we've heard this, Greg, on this show before, also on the radio, is accountants can barely figure it out. We know for sure that border control don't have this done. Like they go from having USMCA thing was one line. It's either exempt, or if it's not, here's what you would be subject to. Now there's like tens of thousands of rows because everything is individual. That's unsustainable in the long run, which is why we got to get past this. What's the advice that you're giving your clients of saying, to try and get some certainty? I imagine, you better have your accountant on it, because they're the ones that they're really expert on it. But are there other things that in terms of helping government understand what the impacts are, so that as we try and have the programs to help business navigate these things, that they have like actual anecdotal examples?
Yeah, I would say a few things. In terms of advice for folks who are in the kind of situation that Marty is, and like my heart breaks. Like this is the heart of our economy. These enterprises like Marty's, and the fact that they're being put through this is it's just bananas. It's unnecessary. It's counterproductive, and it's a shame. And I hope we get through it quickly. I would say a couple of things. Number one, obviously, do your best within reason to identify what the remittances should look like. Number two, show your work. So once you've taken a best guess at looking at the chaos and figuring out what your best guess is at who's owed what, document it, so that in the fullness of time, if somebody comes back and says, "Hey, Marty, like you didn't do this right," you can say, "Well, listen, it's chaos. I did my best. Here's my assumptions." And so have your work, show your work, like they used to say in math class. And then number three is just a context piece, which is the chaos is the point. This is not a byproduct of tariffs. This is the point of tariffs. And it's rude and it's ruthless from the White House, but this is the point. They want guys like Marty to be in distress, so that guys like Marty say to their governments, do a deal with Trump, so that the politicians in Canada are incented to just make the first borderline reasonable deal they can, instead of taking a longer view, enduring more pain, and getting to a better place. So unfortunately, the chaos you're feeling right now, Marty, is exactly the point of tariffs. It's not a byproduct. And once we make peace with that, we can see it a little bit more clearly for what it is. I wish I could be more helpful.
That's good. That's good advice, though. Yeah.
Well, I think one of the things that I'm going to do is contact a trade lawyer on the border who has maybe a little bit more insight as to what it is. And I'm sure that I have to go back to the manufacturer and get that bill of materials if they'll share it. And that's another set of problems.
Right.
Yeah. No, that's I think what ends up happening, and you're exactly right, Matthew, that's what the intent of the whole thing is, but nobody really understands. A lot of people don't understand that there are companies like Marty's going through this every single day. They don't
Absolutely.
know. They don't know where they're going to stand. Marty does not want to figure something out, send it over, pay based on his good word, and then, find out down the road that, oh, gee, he's got this great big bill because he missed this or missed that or didn't calculate this in, and then he comes back, and now the problem is Marty's got to eat every dime of that. It's not going to be the receiver. Marty's going to get pinched with that.
And,
I do
and
see that. Yeah,
the
go
other
ahead,
part
Marty.
is the clients are asking me. I
Yeah.
have a potential client, several in the U.S. So what's the tariff going to be? I have no idea.
Mhm.
No.
Yeah,
And
you
that
almost
just
feel like saying, phone Donald and see what, give a call to the White House.
Yeah, it puts you in a really untenable position. The other side of the coin, I guess, and we can talk about this as and when you think it might be useful, Greg and Ian, is Ontario in particular has stepped up with an unprecedented amount of support to help small and medium enterprises through this thing. So I've got a few
I think we should
details.
talk about that now. Yeah, yeah.
Do you? Okay.
Yes.
Well, maybe I'll just give a bit of a scan if that works. So
Yeah.
The current government of Ontario, and please appreciate my bias, having had the privilege of working as Doug Ford's deputy chief of staff, I have a very high opinion of the man. I think the world of him, and I think they're doing a really good job. There's a lot of folks just as smart and much smarter than me who might disagree, and that's okay, but that's where my perspective is. So when he was elected this cycle, he received his third majority mandate, and it was all about protect Ontario. So he leaned into the tariff chaos and said, I need a fresh mandate to do what I need to do to protect the Ontario economy and communities in light of tariffs. And that means spending a pile of money if I need to. So I'm going to go to the people and I'm going to get a mandate to do that. And so that's what he achieved. So I want to just quickly shout out to my friends and colleagues, Alex and Chad at Bondy and Associates, for doing a tremendous amount of homework here that I'm gonna end up being credited for unjustly. So when you look at Ontario's fiscal situation, we were heading into about a $1.5 billion deficit before this tariff stuff got crazy and stayed crazy. What Ontario has now done under the leadership of Premier Ford and Minister Bethlenfalvy, our finance minister, is they have allocated not a couple of billion, but about 20 billion all in has been allocated for tariff relief and protecting Ontario's economy over the next number of quarters. So our deficit is going to go from about 1.5 billion to about 14.6 billion. That's a big jump. But Ontario's economy is also a big economy. It's about 1.1 trillion. And so going from a $1.5 billion deficit to a $14.5 billion deficit, that just puts Ontario at about the average across provincial economies in terms of the size of their deficit relative to their GDP. So we're still in a solid fiscal foundation going forward. And Ontario's been getting credit rating boosts over the last number of years. So the fiscal situation is solid. There's about $20 billion allocated to this. And in contrast, the feds seem to only have committed about $6.5 billion toward tariff relief, but much more and much more systemic policy change will be coming from the feds following the throne speech in a week or two. So huge amount of money allocated. What's it going to do? I want to highlight 5 different components of the tariff relief that the Ford government has identified. The first is the Ontario Together Fund. I thought I'd start here because it might be one of the more relevant ones to your members, Greg and Ian. So this one so far has been allocated $50 million. That could be 10x by the time we're done this thing. I don't know, but they're starting with 50 million to see how the intake goes. So again, this is the Ontario Together Fund, and we're talking each applicant being entitled to as much as $5 million in grants or loans per project to support manufacturing or tech businesses looking to diversify, grow in Canada or non-US markets to bolster productivity and keep the lights on. So each project is going to be graded to determine how much of that is loan, how much of that is grant, and projects may receive up to 75% of eligible costs. So I know I'm throwing a lot at you here. I'll give you a link after this so that you can go check this stuff out on your own. And you can always reach back out to me. I'll give you my my firm's email address after as well. So what did we just say? We said the Ontario Together Fund is the first of 5 I want to talk about. $50 million total application, up to $5 million per applicant. Some of that's going to be loan, some of that's going to be grant. Your project could be covered up to 75%. And what does it take to be eligible? You have to be a for-profit organization, registered and operating in Ontario, 3 years of operations and financial statements, 5 full-time workers or more. Each eligible project needs a price tag of $200,000 plus. Project has to be on track to be completed within 2 years, and that should meet basic eligibility for you. So something that I'll mention here about this $50 million or up to $5 million per applicant Ontario Together Fund. There's a whole cottage industry out there with people who want to help you with your grants. There are reasonable costs for that, and there are unreasonable costs for that. So if someone comes knocking at your door and says, "Hey, Marty, I think this one might work for you if you need to get some new production capacity to do more sales in Canada, I think I can get you the money." If he comes along and says it's going to be 9 or 10% of your total take from a successful application, that's way too much. Don't do that. The norm is about 5 to 6, maybe 7%. If anyone's looking for support, I have identified a partner at the 5% level. So if you want to chat, I'm happy to. That's your business. But don't let someone take a big cut of your application north of 6 or so percent. Okay. So Greg and Ian, that's one of 5. I can get through the others quicker, but that's a main one.
Yeah, no,
These are
I think
important.
that's useful. I want to come so that people look at this and say, hey, it's only 50 million bucks, and if it's up to 5 million, that could be 10 companies, and it's out. I think the important part of what you talked about is this is the initial 50 million. If this is a program that is working for businesses, the premier has already said, the finance minister's already said, we will keep investing once we know a program is hitting the mark and helping businesses like Marty or others, help them kind of do that. What it's supposed to do is trade diversification or getting into new markets or helping through this process. They will invest more money. So I wouldn't let the $50 million say I don't bother. Is go through the intake phase and see if you're eligible. Because my guess is that, as you point out, Matt, it could be 500, 600, 700 million dollars before it's over if it's working. And so I think that's the important part here.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is so you got to just kind of think this through. And you guys know all this, but just to recap it, we've got a number of parties here. We have the policy setters in the government. We have the applicants who have to go through the application. We've got the system in the middle for the intake. And by starting at 50 million, it's almost a pilot so that the bureaucrats who are going to run this thing and administer it figure out, did we get the application right? Is it smooth? Are we getting money out the door? Take that feedback, implement feedback, and then you can 10x it if you want.
Yeah. Perfect.
Should I maybe just touch on a couple of the others real quick?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to go to there's a Protecting Ontario account worth $5 billion. And this one is more like it's an allocation, and they're going to figure out exactly what to do with it as we move forward, but they've allocated for it in the budget. So this is the Protecting Ontario account is $5 billion in funding. It's going to provide up to $1 billion in immediate liquidity relief as an emergency backstop for businesses facing significant tariff-related disruption. While the remaining $4 billion will be designated for various programs to support affected sectors. So this is where some of the money could come from if they want to 10x the Ontario Together Fund. So there's lots of money on the table, and they're going to try to rationalize how it gets spent for maximum public policy benefit.
Matt, just on that, this is one of the things that I know Greg's been doing phone calls. We're having these types of sessions. Everyone we run into, I was surprised actually, and we've talked about this on this show, but also on the radio show, Greg. of all the issues that have come up, one of the ones that's been most right across the board is liquidity is one of those big issues, is because no one's business virtually, if you're a small or medium sized business, you're not a bank. You don't have money sitting there to cash flow the tariffs that you get charged at the front end, even if you're hoping to get remission relief. So that liquidity is going to be a big issue because no bank is going to give that to businesses. They're not going to give those operating capitals. Is that what is that your sense of what some of this is how to backstop businesses to pay some of those tariffs that they might get back over the fullness of time, but you can't cash flow in the short term?
Yeah, I mean, this is COVID all over again. Same stuff, different day. There's nowhere to go. We got to make sure that guys like Marty stay in business. So we have to hook the money pump up to these guys, and
Yeah.
so that's what this is designed to do.
Okay.
A couple of things I'll just mention more for your awareness than anything, in case some of this is applicable to some of you. And guys, I hope this is helpful. Stop me if I'm going into too much detail.
This has been part of the issue, is that no one's really known where this is going, and government's been struggling to say what programs should we put in the window. So this is very useful to kind of start down what are some of the ones that actually apply for now.
Yeah, the lights are starting to come on, and we're figuring out where things are now. So there's $9 billion allocated to tax deferrals. This has been active since April 7, 2025. So Ontario is going to provide cash flow relief to 80,000 businesses by deferring some provincial taxes from April 1 to October 1, 2025. So I'd be interested to hear if anyone has heard about this before this call from anyone, whether it's your accountant or CRA, just by show of hands or thumbs up or something. Has anyone been talked to about tax remittance deferral? I only see a couple of.
Yeah, I would say, Matt, we've talked about this. No one has mentioned it to us. Like, I mean, any of our small businesses, and I think this is one of the reasons, saying, hey, nice idea, but no one either knows about it, or B, that's not the big nut that's going to be, like, it may help if they were to do it, but how much is it actually helping the cash flow?
Yeah.
And I guess that's
I think it to keep a business's lights on or off. I think that that certainly. Why wouldn't you take advantage of it if it's available, right?
Yeah,
like it doesn't.
That's it. But there's whenever you roll out public policy, and you guys know this, you have to define the problem.
Yeah.
Right. And the government has done that effectively. If you look at the electoral results, tariffs and Trump are the problem. Provide the solution, which is $20 billion in tariff relief allocation. But then you have to educate the public so that it's able to take you up on the policy that you're offering them. And so that's what today's about, is starting to kind of help the public get their arms around this stuff in a tactile way. Nobody cares that this stuff is floating around the ether. It's about how can you guys hook your businesses up to this and get relief, right?
Yeah.
So a couple other quick things. There's $4 billion allocated to WSIB surplus rebates. The first $2 billion tranche of rebates was dispersed in February and March 2025. The second $2 billion tranche of rebates will be dispersed by June 2025. Okay, so that's $4 billion in WSIB rebates. So I'll be interested to hear through Ian and Greg if you see those rebates kicking in automatically. The last one I want to talk about, then I can just give you a sense of where Ontario stands compared to other provinces. The Ontario-made manufacturing investment tax credit. There's $1.3 billion there. So that's an additional allocation of $1.3 billion over 3 years. To help lower costs for businesses that invest in buildings, machinery, and equipment that are used for manufacturing or processing in Ontario. That is not rolled out yet, but it was included in the Ontario 2025 budget, so watch for it this summer. That was the Ontario-made manufacturing investment tax credit.
So is that actually going to be for things? Is it just companies in Ontario, or does that mean the products or the investments in building machine all have to be Ontario made or bought?
It's basically it's CapEx support for Ontario-based businesses.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I think that one might be some of the that might be useful once people get an understanding of what that can do, right? Because that would be,
like
because that could help
with
on cash flow and making the investments to diversify, right? So they can do both sides of it.
100%. So with Marty as our use case here, a bunch of the stuff when it actually hits his bank account will be useful. Tax deferrals, WSIB rebates. From an application perspective, I see the Ontario-made manufacturing investment tax credit. So Marty, if you want to do some CapEx on your machinery, and you can make a case that it's going to help you with domestic sales or overcome tariffs, I think that'll be useful for you. That's CapEx. And then going back up to the Ontario Together Fund, it's CapEx as well, but it's designed, I think, to get more money out the door faster. So that's why they're starting with the 50 million. And I think that one's going to completely swell up over time.
Yeah.
So, Matt, and as I guess you may have answered this, I had to take a call from my daughter who's been on a 30-hour trip from Halifax to Amsterdam, 30 hours in any event, a lot of time in airports. But it's your sense that the government has announced these programs are still being rolled out. The sense that I hear from our MPPs, people we've talked to around Queen's Park, is they're putting these out there. If they're not hitting the mark, they will quickly kind of retool and say, well, that didn't work. They're not going to be stuck on saying, well, because we announced it, and if we take it back and repurpose it, will look bad. I think they're struggling in a very, and this is the conversation you had with Marty, is no one really knows because the U.S. doesn't know about what their own tariff policy is doing to people. And I think the provincial Ontario government, actually provinces right across the country, and the federal government, now that there's an actual government and things are starting to happen again, they're all trying to figure out what is it that we can do to support business. So that there could be some, I don't want to say weaving, but some zigs and zags in the row. Is that a fair way of looking at what the province is trying to do?
Yeah, for sure. So I would say two things. One is absolutely get in front of your members of provincial parliament with this stuff. So, I imagine most of your folks are scattered in the 5 different ridings here in Waterloo region. So you've got some great MPPs on various sides of the House. Get in front of them. If you don't understand something, their job is to help you understand it. And when you have feedback, when you go to tackle one of these forms, and it just doesn't make any sense the way it's written, because God bless the bureaucrats in Toronto, they don't know how Marty makes his stuff. You got to tell them. They want that feedback, and they thrive on it. Second, and then I think probably over to Marty for his question, is just remember, chaos is the plan. Chaos is the plan out of the White House. So what he's trying to do is disorient the world economy so that he can make major shifts in U.S. economic posture while everybody's freaking out. So to the extent we can, let's not freak out, and just remember chaos is the plan, and fall victim to it as little as we can. But I think Marty has a question.
Yeah.
Actually, it's just a statement, and from the U.S. side, I had a potential dealer in Montana, and he said, "Oh, well, I don't know what to do. I'm going to call my local rep," and nobody answers the phone because they're not there anymore. So that's another layer of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's going to be the problem. That's the problem on that side of the border. I think, giving kudos to the average citizen over there and the average business over there. They want to do business, right? They want to do business here or anywhere that they can do business. They're feeling the impacts right now of not being able to get a hold of anybody, not be able to get any answers, because even those secretaries that are sitting around the sofa in the Oval Office and standing behind the sofas when he's entertaining leaders, and clapping, yes, and cheering him on, they don't know what's coming out of his mouth tomorrow. So nobody's got any answers, because the reality of it is there aren't any answers coming out of the president's office, and likely never will be. And I think, to Matt's point, that generates chaos. That is exactly what he wants. He He wants everybody to be fearful of what's coming out of the White House next.
And Marty is highlighting, said this nothing to do with tariffs or directly, which is all of the cuts that you're identifying, Marty, is there's just not going to be people there to help businesses on the U.S. side. And that hurts our businesses here that you can't get, because you have to have answers on both sides of the border, and you're not going to get that. And that's going to be an ongoing problem. But to Matt's point, I think it's wise counsel is let's see if these programs are hitting the spot, try not to figure out and say, we are going to have to get through the next probably 6 to 12 months. Even if he kind of wakes up tomorrow and tries to unwind it all, Matt, the problem is, like, business investment is frozen and people won't really trust is he going to wake up tomorrow and change his mind again. So there's going to be a period of time of the negotiations of the full agreement, and that's way beyond our pay scale. But our business has got to live in their world, right? Like, this is like our members got to live in the world that politicians are creating for us. But it's going to be a period of time. Like, this is not going away in the next 3 or 4 months. There's going to be some legs to this, and that's why these programs, we got to get them right and make sure people are getting that support to kind of get through the short term, which is kind of where we were in COVID. Like, how do you keep businesses alive so that when the pandemic's over, there's actually business to do, and we're kind of in that same situation.
I think where a lot of people are trying to define the difference between a tax and a tariff, and there is no difference. It's just a tariff is a tax, period, end of story. It's no different than a sales tax. So, but the only issue with this is that there are different taxes or tariffs on products from different countries. So that, Marty, is where your problem is. You have a piece of equipment that is truly global in nature. It's got products from China and Europe and, who knows where it comes from, Canada as well, and maybe even the US. But at the end of the day, when it's all assembled and sitting in its crate, ready for you to ship it to your dealer in the United States, it's your responsibility in some manner. It just makes the sale a little quicker and a little easier. If you can identify the percentage of Chinese content, US content, European content, and Canadian content, so that you can apply or at least tell your suppliers, here are the tax levels on each part of it. So 100% of the value is X, and 5% of it is Chinese. So there's what the Chinese tariff is going to be. 25% of it is European. There's what it's going to be. And then you can at least then give a reasonable and probably accurate statement to your customers in the United States. Here is what you are going to be charged when that tractor hits your border pickup. And I think it's a complicated process for you to go through because you have a multinational product that you're selling, but you may have to go through that, or try and source some other suppliers if you possibly can. I know you're in a little different situation with that, but if there is the possibility to be able to do that, try and do that.
Well, so Matt, let me just put in a question here. So we've talked about the government programs, at least from the province, and my guess is there will be federal programs that will emerge in reasonably short order, to address some of these as well, now that there is a new government. But so there's the government programs. So there's we always are saying, from our perspective, talk to your accountant, talk to your lawyer, talk to your banker, right? Those are the first things, because they're I think everyone would try and do the right thing, but there are these other organizations on top of that. So the Business Development Bank, which is complementary lending to your banker. Export Development Canada will have some programs already to try and help with trade dislocation. The Canadian Commercial Corps, which basically ensures your form. So there are some organizations in place to kind of assist. It's when we're not used to using those Canadian institutions that it becomes, I don't know where to start. What's your advice? I mean, and you know, you're in the business of helping people, and some of these are the programs. Some of it's, you know, you're advising other types of organizations. But you've been in government, you've been in the private sector, you've worked for community tech. How do you? What would be your general advice to people here, Marty and others, kind of that, or watch this later on and say, how do you get started? So, you know, your MPP is a good one because you've already talked about that with government programs that are in place. But there's these other things as well, these other organizations. How do you kind of, you know, pull them all together and say people are still trying to run their business while they're trying to figure out how they might be supported by government? What's your advice to people on that?
Yeah, well, yeah. Let me answer that and just provide a little bit of context as I do. So you mentioned a range of different federal agencies. Export Development Canada has a trade impact program worth $5 billion. That's the bulk of where federal support has gone so far. So that's loans and insurance products to support Canadian exporters in diversifying their markets. Um, so there will be an application portal for that. BDC, the Business Development Bank of Canada loans, $500 million application there. Favorably priced loans to small and medium businesses impacted by tariffs, including those in affected supply chains. Again, that's all about liquidity. And then lastly, Farm Credit Canada financing, new lending capacity. They'll provide emergency credit lines up to 500,000 and term loans to the agriculture and agri-food industry to help cover operating expenses amid trade disruptions. So in terms of how to actually get your hands on that stuff, I suppose there's several different things you can do. You know, one is you just hop on Google and you make calls till you hit pay dirt. All right. You can find this stuff once you know the names of it. And I put a link to the Ontario Together Trade Fund in the chat here. So, you know, you can take a look at that and find your way to apply. You can contact your MPP's office and say, hey, I was just talking to my friends at the chamber. I know there's a pile of stuff out there I can apply to. I need you to actually help me hitch my wagon to the application process. Can one of your staff help me? I will come to you, whatever it takes. You just got to muckle onto them and not let go until they get you the actual form and you're actually in business applying for some of this money. And then the third thing you can do, and I don't want to sound self-interested here, you can work with a third party. You just got to be careful though, because there's a lot of fly-by-night application grant companies, and anybody can put up a website in 40 minutes and make it look legitimate. But you need to look for a track record of success. You need to look for, you need to look for all those signs that you all know so well from being experienced business people about what looks like a credible organization and what doesn't after you talk to the people behind it. So there's a bunch of fly-by-nighters out there. Don't let them take advantage of you. Don't pay more than 6 or 7% for an external party to handle your grant writing for you. I have a partner that I work with. If you're interested, let me know. Zero pressure. There's a lot of great ones out there. Just don't get duped by a bad one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say that there is that place to start probably is, again, use your elected officials, your oh
Yep.
no, in our case we've got several new MPP or MPs, so they may take a bit of time, but we've got some experienced MPPs here that can all be very useful, as you point out. Navigating the initial part of where to get to and what the programs are, and they will know that, I mean, whether it's federal or provincial, those provincial members will know what the federal programs are. So, hey, we don't have one,
Yeah.
but there's because that's because they often get, people don't understand what's federal and what's provincial sometimes. So the staff that they have in their offices will say, hey, here's some other things that you can do, and so that's great advice, Matt. And for sure, we see this all the time in business with our members is, if you get the wrong consultant, you pay a lot of money for no results, and that's not a good place to be. So do your homework on that once you've got what the programs are.
Any questions from anyone else to Matt that maybe we haven't touched on that you are wondering about? As Matt put in the chat, info@bondy-associates.com. Reach out if you think of something later. Matt would be happy to respond and get back to you on it. If you obviously, if you need some guidance, more in-depth guidance from Matt or some support from Matt, he's a member of both chambers, so would love to work with chamber members as well in any manner that he can. So we have
First thing I did, Greg. First thing I did.
yeah.
Legitimately, when I set up the business.
And we have, because we worked side by side with Matthew through COVID when he was at Communitech. We have immense faith and trust in him. His guidance has always been very, very helpful to us, and that's, you know, because of the work that he's put into his life so far, in making sure he understands how things work. And if anybody understands how government works, it's the guy who sat beside the guy that was making the decision on how government should work. So
I've worked. I've done a little contract with Matt because I had two things on my list of things to do. One was the new hospital and family physicians, which is really an important part of what we do, and I need a little advice on that. But mostly, I was like, how can you educate Gregory and make him smarter? I'm constantly, so we haven't accomplished that one yet, but it's an ongoing thing.
Well, maybe the three of us can get out for a game of golf sometime, because Matthew's back in the saddle on that as well. You know, maybe we'll have a little game. Ian will give us all
No, I'm not giving it. No, I'm not doing that. Listen, Matt, thank you for joining us today. I don't think we got any more questions. We'll let you get back to, because you're hard at work. Let everyone get on with their day. But thank you for spending time with us, Matt. I know the Bondy and Associates, you've got some great associates, but the number one is your wife, is your biggest associate, and she certainly adds to the smart meter at Bondy and Associates.
Yes.
So thank you to you and the gang at
No,
at
thank
Bondy and
you. Thank you.
Associates.
Ian's referring to my wife, Jessica, who works as our COO. She is a very distinguished leader in the not-for-profit space.
Yeah.
And now I get to be told what to do, like from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to bed, no matter where I am. So
Yep.
I just figure I have two daughters, and I just say yes now, because I'm eventually going to get there. It's a little bit like when they say, when you're in a crisis, what's the end goal, and get there quick. Now it's just like, just get to yes, because the girls are always right. And
of course. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Listen,
well, thanks, guys.
Thank you so much for spending time with us today, Gregory, and we will.
Thanks, Marty, for being the topic of discussion as well. So
hopefully that was useful. Okay, thanks everybody, and I think we're trying to get Flavio on to kind of really dig into the auto space, because that's unique unto itself. But also he's still part of the Prime Minister's Council. But it'll either be the next week or the week after. So we'll let everyone know when we've got another guest lined up, and please reach out to Greg, myself. You know, there's lots of people that are ready to help. You gotta, you know, as Marty has, asked the questions, and we'll do our best to try and make sense of what is you know, as Matt described it, chaos is the word of the day. So we just gotta try and fight through that. Okay, everyone, have a great day.
Have a great day. Thanks, folks.
Toodaloo.